Okay, so quick show of hands. How many of you guys work at the marketing or branding department of a corporation or brand? Okay, and how many of you work at an agency? And how many of you are consultants or freelancers? Okay, we have 3, the brave ones. Next up, we're going to talk about one of the main themes of this stage, which is storytelling. Storytelling is incredibly important now, since we have a proliferation of channels where we communicate with our customers. So next up, we're going to have an amazing panel that will bring you insights about this. And I would like to introduce our moderator, Calvin So, the Executive Director of Growth for the Asia Pacific for RGA. Please, round of applause. Guys, you can, yeah.
Yeah, take it away. Okay. We have one missing panelist. He's over here. So while they're settling down, let me just tell you, we had a 2-hour meeting in the room earlier on with the panelists. We had a lot of PowerPoint charts, very fancy. We had some moving slides and all. And we've determined that this session will be fun, since it's about storytelling, so it's going to be enjoyable. We're not sure whether it'll be enjoyable for you, but certainly the panels will be having a lot of fun. So thank you very much. Welcome. Our guest is Javier, Ajay, and Delbert. And since this is a session about storytelling, I thought the best way to start is to let our guests introduce themselves with a one-line story. Pretty much how we all fake our stories on LinkedIn. That's what they're going to do now.
Tinder.
Oh, Tinder, sorry. And this is Javier. Over to you first.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. I'm Javier. I come from South America, from Ecuador. I've been working for 20 years for the Coca-Cola company in several places. It's a nice job. It's really a good job, something I enjoy doing every day, but it's not my dream job. I have a dream job. I actually have still 2 dreams I want to fulfill. One is after Coke, I'm going to own a bookstore. It's going to be a bookstore with wine and cheese together. One of the reasons is, of course, I like wine and cheese, but books is all about stories. The stories is all about emotions, and we're going to talk more about that today. And I really enjoy being caught by the emotions of the books. The second dream, actually, is I want to have that hair. And I'm not sure which one of those 2 dreams are going to be most costly for me, but I'm going to pursue both.
Okay. Awesome. Ajay. Dude stole my line. But kidding aside, thank you, Javier. So they were asking which of us work in marketing department, and I'm guilty of that. And before that, I used to be in advertising. What attracted me to both these professions is the need and the joy of sharing stories. So probably the best story that I heard, and if there was one line I'd like to put, I steal that shamelessly from McCann Erickson, an agency of old, which says, truth well told. So to me, storytelling is all about truth being told well.
Okay, fantastic. Delbert, with the man with the hair.
Man with the hair.
So, hello. I could start off by explaining how I get my hair this high, but that will take up the entire session. So let me just do a brief intro about myself. I'm actually a failed musician, so I wanted to be a rock star, I think like most young kids in the Philippines, where I'm from. And having failed in that, I guess I was like, let me just do marketing, because I found myself in P&G selling soap, and now I'm selling telco plans at Circles.Life, and it's pretty great being the underdog this time, not being the big bad guy corporate giant like P&G is, and going up against like the Singtels and Starhubs of the world. Yeah.
Very good story. And I'm Calvin So. I used to be a regional creative director a long time ago, and then I took a 5-year sabbatical to be a full-time father, helped my son do a TEDx talk, he did a Kickstarter, and we built a 21st century prototype home with sustainable farming built in. And now I'm here on stage back at work. So I think the next question we have will be, now that you've told your personal stories, why are stories important to you? right? It could be a personal one, it's something that comes from you that kind of resonated. So we're trying to find out the key influences there, and then we'll tie it back to the brands. So Ajay, over to you. Why are stories important to you?
Sure. So I think my hero when it comes to storytelling was my father. So besides being a man of letters, he was Indian and incredibly verbose and a lawyer. So, telling stories came naturally to him. And almost every evening he would sit down and tell us stories. And there were certain busy days when he would come and almost in a haiku-like fashion tell us a very incredibly short story, which went like this. There was a king, there was a queen, they both died, the end. And I was always, trying to understand what did he mean by that story? Why would he tell us that story? And then I started to introspect, and then I started to extrospect. And then I just figured out he was short on time. But nevertheless, whatever you do, if you can tell a story, short and succinct, and make your point, it works. So that's how I see it.
Fantastic. Delbert?
I think as a marketer, stories are really important, especially your customer stories, because it's the best validation that you've actually made a difference in their lives. So I remember this one story a customer was telling me. She just recently switched over to Circles.Life, and both her and her partner were now on Circles.Life, and she was ecstatic because now her boyfriend couldn't say or couldn't not reply to her messages. So true story, she was saying like her boyfriend before would turn off his mobile data just to not exceed his limit, and that made her really happy. And it sounds almost too simple, and it almost sounds like an ad, but this was something someone actually told me, and it was a happy ending for her. I'm not sure about the boyfriend, maybe he was hiding some other things, but yeah, I think it's a simple validation that you have something that people actually resonate with, and you're on the right track.
Okay, very good. Javier?
Maybe two parts in the answer. One is from a human perspective. I don't remember where, that storytelling is something that differentiates human beings from other animals. We have that ability of create stories and transmit those stories generation after generation. And the good thing about the stories is that it can be used to communicate values, knowledge, many other things, but values and knowledge for sure. And the thing is, it's done through emotions. And as we know, when you communicate any story, any knowledge, any value through emotions, it sticks. Right. It's embraced by people. Anyone here in the room that has kids knows that, right? Whenever we need to teach values to the kids, the better way to go is a good, powerful story. Our marketing model in Coca-Cola believes in that same approach to building brands. And it's about communicating the values of the brands, the promise of the brand through stories, because we believe that decisions are made through emotions, and the best way to communicate emotions is through storytelling.
Okay, so I think the point here was to establish that a lot of people are wondering how valuable a story is. The thing is, we all grew up with stories. Ever since you're young, it's kind of coded into you. And from the earliest days when human beings were still quite hairy and sitting around campfires, they were drawing stuff on the cave walls. Those were all stories. So it's not a new medium. It's been something that's been with us all the time. It's just how we tell it, as you say, and forming an emotional connection and understanding who you're telling that story to. The second question I have is more brand related, and I'll start with Delbert, which is, and you kind of partly answered that, but what would your brand be without stories? If you didn't tell your brand story, where would your brand be now?
I think as a new brand, it's very important to start with your own story, what your mission is, and for us, it's always about giving power back to the customer, however that might be. And unlike like the other brands here on stage, which have like a long history, for us, the future is still yet to come. So what that means for us is we need to decide on what the narrative is, what the pain point is. So in our case, the pain point was pretty straightforward. Like I was mentioning earlier, in Singapore, despite it being like one of the highest smartphone penetration countries in the world, you still have pretty low usage of mobile data. And a big part of that is people are deathly afraid of exceeding their data limit. So the narrative is basic. It's simply you have the incumbents who are literally profiting from this frustration. And like literally, as in they review it on their quarterly KPIs. You can see how many people actually exceed their data limit. And here we come with a solution. That was a simple narrative. And we brought this to life by launching this product of ours last year, which was 20 gigabytes for $20. So those who are Singaporean here, I hope you guys have heard of it. And we made that narrative real by actually launching fake telco, amongst all things. We launched the fake telco, which lampooned and satirized the existing offerings from the existing telcos. So we made ads about it. We bought all sorts of out-of-home placements, and then we vandalized it in broad daylight. All legally, of course. No one went to jail. And like with that, we were able to tell our story. We didn't need to create like a touching piece of content about someone crying because their boyfriend wouldn't text them. We just made the frustration loud and clear, and we were able to tell our story and why what we had was the solution to the problem.
So just a quick add-on to that. When you look at the data, do you use as the incoming data comes in, do you use it to tell, reframe, and reshape the story as it advances?
So I think the market is actually fast evolving right now. If you look at the last 17 years, there's not been any player in Singapore besides the three. And then now we come in, and then now you have everyone is coming out of the woodwork to see like, oh, maybe if Circles.Life can do it, maybe I can do it too. So there's a lot of players coming in, and that kind of changes the narrative a bit. So we have to evolve and really understand what is then the next pain point and how do we tell like a better story to capture the next leg of growth.
Okay, fantastic. And then Javier, coming from a company that's well renowned for telling stories that, you know, created a story in the 70s that reverberated around the world about uniting the world. What is the value? What is that story for the brand?
And there's a difference between, we differentiate between the brand promise and the storytelling.
Right.
The brand promise is what the brand is at the end of the day, and it has to be consistent. It has to be universal. And we have a portfolio of brands, but let me pick Coca-Cola brand. It's all about enjoyment and positivity. We believe that when people enjoy and is positive, they connect better. We believe that when people connect better, the world is a better place to live in. That's a simple promise. I could tomorrow translate that statement into 100 languages and put those out there with the brand promise. It's not going to connect with people. It's not going to engage people, because then again, people connect through stories, not through promises. Right. The promise is important to ensure the consistency, but the way we go about it is find a relevant local way to tell that story. And of course, if you are trying to tell the story to Chinese people, it's not the same trying to tell to Ecuadorians. If you are trying to tell to people that are married with 3 kids, it's not the same as telling to the teenager. So it's hard work. Brand promise requires consistency. Storytelling is hard work. It requires insights.
Yeah.
You know, a story without insights doesn't work. It requires creativity. We really need agencies. It requires being timely. You know, there's a moment to tell the story to the consumer. Right. And today, thanks to technology, stories can be interactive, can be co-created, but most importantly, it requires a point of view. It's not just, brands don't need only to tell a story to reflect what people feel, do, or want. It has to have a point of view of the brand.
Right. Fantastic. Okay. And then on to Ajay. You know, storytelling for a computer brand will be quite difficult, especially when if you're talking about a particular chip that's embedded into the innards of a computer that you don't produce or own. How would that affect Intel?
So, it's incredibly interesting when I hear both of them speak. And the first thing I was thinking in my head is, what does Intel sell? Technically, we sell sand. If you were to be more specific, we sell silicon. Statistically, 90% you in this room have used our product. But I'll even it out and say everyone in this room has used our product. I can also say with a very high degree of confidence that almost 90-95% of you have never seen our product or will go through your life blissfully never seeing our product, yet you will experience my product on an everyday basis. So when you're telling a story of an ingredient that goes in and builds out another brand, storytelling for us becomes of supreme importance. Because how do I take that intrinsic promise, and Javier called it brand promise, how do I take that intrinsic promise of my brand and then be able to amplify it with another brand, say like HP or Dell or Lenovo or Fujitsu or Toshiba or Apple, and make their brand promise even stronger, yet not diminishing my brand promise. Right. And that is what we do with our storytelling. So that even though we are a part of a bigger whole, we continue to be seen as that important ingredient, that key enabler, that part which makes that brand promise come true. And that is what we do by telling great stories.
Right, fantastic. A question came out, especially when Delbert was talking about it. And this is up for a panel to discuss and answer, when you think about stories, who comes up with the story first? Is it a story from the brand, or does the consumer dictate the story?
So, to me, stories are part of an ongoing conversation.
Okay.
Just like Delbert said it, there was a conversation he was having with the customer that became a story. There was something which Intel was passionately and deeply involved, which is called conflict-free minerals. So what we put in our processors is conflict-free. Everything that we buy out of Africa, we ensure that it comes from non-conflict regions. And to that was incredibly important to us. And that became incredibly important to many of our customers. So that became a huge story for us. So stories can come from any source as long as it helps you validate and bring to life your brand promise. Those are the right engaging conversations and stories that you want to be telling.
Okay.
No, please.
I think it's one of those seemingly chicken or egg kind of things, but I think if you really think about it, everything starts with a need or a pain point. So that's something, no matter how good a brand builder you are, you can't just kind of manufacture out of thin air. So it's really up to the individual, up to the entrepreneur, up to the marketer, up to the company to identify, does this pain point make sense for our story? I could go on about how you can do this on a quantitative level, think about the size of price, think about how well you're able to address that problem. But it kind of starts with that. That's how I think about it. So if in our case, like let's say the customer issue is different, like what we will face up in our next launch. So we're planning to launch in Indonesia next. What the issues that Singaporeans face is going to be different from the issues that Indonesians face. And therefore, my narrative has to change. Yeah. But I need to find the commonality between where my brand starts from, which is giving power back to the customer, and what people are actually looking for in Indonesia.
Okay.
I believe that the greatest stories start with people and with notion of understanding the context, reading the context and the insights. The best example I have now is last year in Australia, there was a situation, there was a discussion promoted by the government about legalizing same-sex marriage. The governor of Australia, they called for public consultation, and then ultimately he decided that he was asking the people to vote against or in favor of that. By coincidence, we had in the marketplace a campaign about Coca-Cola No Sugar. Coca-Cola No Sugar, and the claim, the whole campaign was about the taste you love now without sugar. And we saw what was happening. We came with a point of view which is human rights, you don't consult. Human rights, you don't put out there for voting. Human rights, you need to grant. End of discussion. So we, in 6 days, we made the decision to move and change the campaign completely using the same material. So basically, we took and we strike out the words and just kept the billboards with the word love, and we launched cans in the marketplace replacing Coca-Cola with love and making a point of view about this is not for discussion. We should support this.
Right.
That was an amazing story that started by reading what's happening with the people. So I would argue that the greatest, the strongest stories start with the people, but you need to have a point of view about it.
Okay, so that's to your point about everyone's very clear. The brand has a set of promises which you adhere to, they're what you stand for, but then you look for whether it's a brand launch or product launch where you have a story to tell to match with the current consumer needs, and tell it in a way that they're more receptive with a plot and a storyline that is relevant to them. Okay, I suppose another question is always to talk about the value of a story. What is the value of the story? And so far, all the conversation has been about an outward-facing story to the customers and the consumers and to business. But what is the value of the story internally as well? Let me see. I'm supposed to now start with Javier.
With me?
Yes.
I think, of course, those stories speak to human beings, and we all are human beings, and we get caught by them. I believe that this is stronger, the value of the promise, and being honest to the brand promise and to the company promise is more important to engaging employees in the system. So I would tell you that for me the most important part is that have a clear definition of what your brand and your company stand for, and then bring that to life in the stories that you put outside and also in the stories that you tell to your employees.
Okay.
Good.
I was told to speak louder and deeper, so I'm going to do that. So I'm going to break this down into 2 parts. I'm going to tell you what it does for Intel, and then I'm going to talk about something which is more topical, because I'm reading some of those questions there, and I'm hoping to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So storytelling for Intel personally is in the value of tens of billions, because we are among the top 20 Fortune brands, and our brand is built on a brand goodwill for a product that can be highly commoditized. I don't think you know many other brands of silicon makers whose product goes into an ingredient. So everything that we've built up is a function of that. Impressive storytelling. And we've run multiple campaigns over the course of the years to express ourselves in the best possible way, both internally and externally. Something which I mentioned a little bit earlier, conflict-free materials. That was a huge deal for us. We fundamentally believed in that. We wanted to go out and express ourselves, and we did that with our campaign. Something else that we did was our heroes are different from your heroes, and that is where we kind of talked about people who have made a huge impact in the technology world. So folks like Ajay, no relative of mine, who went out and invented the USB stick. And we said for Intel, it's the techies, it's the nerds, it's the geeks who are the heroes. Right. Our heroes are different from your heroes. And that started to connect a lot of engineers and a lot of people who worked in Intel to feel pride with that company and that brand. But the case that I wanted to talk to you about was that's something that's in the news, and something which I've been following with a high degree of interest is around Starbucks and how they had this huge outage about a month back where they had some people in their open spaces of color, and they were thrown out. And what then led to was a huge backlash, both externally, and it hurt a lot of their employees as well. What Starbucks did was own up to the problem, so they went and trained their folks, but more importantly, they got someone like Stanley Nelson, who's a great documentary teller of color, to go out there and express what people of color feel. And then Starbucks endorsed that story. So here was a brand which went out and said, hey, we acknowledge this, we understand this is important, we will fix ourselves, but we also want to show that this is a bigger societal problem, and as Starbucks, we are engaging in it. So I think, the story can be topical, the story can be controversial, and the story can be engaging. As long as you hit many of those points, you will get it viral.
Please keep flashing if my voice is not loud enough. It's quite stressful looking at this screen there in front. So let me just break it down why I feel like where stories have value outside of the external result. So internally, we go back to the mission of giving power back to the customer. So whatever product we launch, whether it's 20 gigabytes for $20, $3 unlimited a day, or what we just recently launched, which was a $0 per month flexi plan, it goes back to that mission. Are we giving power back to the customer? And it helps really drive decision. This is our North Star. If the product that we're launching does not align to that, then we're doing something wrong. And personally, it is of a lot of value for me because removing all the sexy marketing that we do, at least I think it's sexy. Removing all of that.
Panel agrees it's sexy, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. But removing all of that, you still have an objectively superior solution to what's out there in the market because of the fact that we go back to the mission of giving power back to the customer. So I can go toe to toe with my friend and tell him that, you'll be better off if you move over to Circles.Life. And that's what I'm actually kind of softly saying to my friends here. And it's all because of that. Because we develop a product that is objectively superior, and it goes back to the mission. There's only 8 minutes left. Should we answer some questions?
Yeah, we'll be answering some questions after this. So I think to quickly, we're going to skip some of the other questions because I think you'd like to make use of the panel where they're up here to answer some of these. To sum up, how many of you are Singaporeans here? Just to raise up. We don't get tested on the value of stories, but the value of a story is, if you look at the Marvel Enterprise or Star Wars or Harry Potter's, those are billion-dollar stories and enterprises, and that's the value of it. It's the creativity and the storyline that we use to sell. I mean, if you think about Disneyland is a company made up of stories. So all we have to do is find a way to take your product, whatever you're selling, and then wrap it around in a story that's relevant, which then, to all the panelists have been saying, understand your customer and know what stories they are open to listening and what the current trend or societal conversation is, and be part of that conversation. So it's not so difficult, and in some ways I hope the panel here has demystified it. So let's start with the first question. Famous. With a limited brand budget and history, what actionable steps can you take to create a localized and hopefully viral brand story? Who would like to go first?
For me, I already spoke about that. Make sure you have a clear insight and make sure you have creativity. Usually when you have those both, the content gets viral.
I think when we've thought of our the crazy stuff that we've done, going back to Javier's point, it's really about creativity. I'm going to focus a bit more on the last part of the point, which is the viral brand story, because that's how you kind of get disproportionate returns on your investment. So I sit with my team and we kind of throw around some ideas, and we really try to stretch the boundaries. And at times, it's almost like, okay, what can we do which might get us arrested? So it's almost like that level of craziness. So like the last one that we did was we created like a fake vending machine that gave away free money in the middle of the CBD, which obviously got so many people over there. And again, all done legally. No one got arrested, no one got fined or anything. But I think if you think about how much money we spent there, we literally made the fake box, or a box, made it look like a machine, had a person inside, and the money that we spent there, it's not your like Coke money, it's not your Coke money sounds strange, but it's not your Coca-Cola money, it's not your P&G kind of money, but it worked in our case because we were bold enough to, let's kind of just stretch the boundaries. If no one cared about it, then it's okay. Then we just lost that much money. We can move on.
Yeah.
But it's all about taking that risk and really stretching what you think you can do. And obviously, it still has to kind of align with what the customers will relate to.
Anything to add?
I'll put it down to 3 C's: context, content, and creativity. If it doesn't matter how big your budget is, if you feel you've hit all of these well, you can tell a powerful story which will go viral.
Yeah. I don't think a history is anything to be concerned about, because a story creates it at the start. And I don't think budget matters a lot if you look at what Delbert's management is, which is, let me tell you a story that will get me reported in the Straits Times, for example. If you use that as a yardstick, you'll be able to kind of figure out whether the story is powerful or not. And if you tell a story that everyone has told, no one's going to listen to it. Then you have to resort to a celebrity that you have to pay a lot of money to tell this story so that people pay attention. So if you go back, yeah, that's fake love, right? Okay. So exactly. So if you, like all the panelists have said, figure out the insight, figure out and be creative to get the unfair advantage, then you're halfway on your way to telling a convincing brand story. Next question, very quick answer, I suppose. Is storytelling more important with millennials or less? 6 seconds or less, this answer.
Absolutely.
Okay, absolutely.
Storytelling is important for human beings.
Yeah.
Millennials are still human beings.
Yeah.
I don't think many of them are, but yeah.
Okay, the only millennial on our panel is Delbert, so he should answer this question.
Yes, true.
I thought I was Gen Z. No, not Gen Z. No, I think like they said, like millennials are people too. So they appreciate a good story, just like anyone else.
Yeah. So I think sometimes we ask these questions is because we're older and we're like, oh, is it? No, I think stories are the same. So like I said, it's been around since the time when we were hairy and in a cave and drawing animals. So it doesn't change. Except maybe it's now shorter, maybe in 6 seconds or less. Is there a difference when storytelling to the average consumer versus high net worth individuals who might appreciate more direct messaging and communication? I would say there's a few assumptions in there that you assume that high net worth people like to be talked to directly and communicated to directly, but maybe our panelists can answer.
As I said at the beginning, what doesn't work is try to apply the same recipe across cultures, ages, lifestyles. And you said it, Calvin, is easy. I would say no, it's not. It's hard work. That's why we have a lot of people working on this, and agencies and insights mining. The mistake is, then again, is use the wrong storytelling with adult people is going to destroy value. Finding the right storytelling is going to create value.
2 parts. I would actually look at it as a high involvement product versus a low involvement product. So So net worth is not a function of how much time you invest in the purchase. It's the involvement that you have with that product, which determines how much you want to invest and how you want to tell the story. That said, you could also use reverse snobbery, as in the case of IKEA, where they say you don't have to be rich to be smart. And not even a rich person who will read that ad say, I'm not smart. So that's an ad which can cut across genres. So it's just figuring out who your target audience is and making sure that you can build that context, build that connect, and make sure that it's creative.
I think they've said most of the things that I would have said. The only thing here is like, there's also a difference in not necessarily average consumer versus high net worth, but it's also a function of business model. Like, if, for instance, the way you would sell, let's say, Maserati is quite different versus how you would sell like a Honda Civic. So it's a different kind of business model, different kind of margins that play into it.
Absolutely. Okay. How do you get buy-in from the non-marketing folks in, this is a problem that is quite common. How do you get buy-in from the non-marketing folks in your company who typically don't care so much about the story as much as the results?
Explain how marketing works, put clear metrics, and don't change them whenever your marketing is not working, because we have that temptation. You know, these are the metrics. When we don't get to the metrics, oh, well, I didn't meet that exactly, and here's, be consistent, accept when your marketing is not good, be willing to say, hey, that was not good marketing, I'm gonna do better next time. I think that, honestly, explaining to people and being consistent is gonna do the work.
Okay.
So an average CMO has a lifespan of about 22 months. And that's a function of this, where they are never able to explain in a manner that the other side understands that marketing works. That said, marketing does its job or doesn't do its job. You need to have KPIs, you need to have preset agreements, and you need to make sure you take your partners through that journey. End of the day, people are buying a brand promise and people are buying a product. Marketing can bring you to that place, but ultimately it's your product which is going to make that shift. It also has to be on price, it also has to be the place where the product is, and it also has to happen on what the competition is offering to that degree on that day. So a lot of these things go in, but as long as your brand has that intrinsic value, which brings the customer and connects the customer to you, I think you're doing a good job.
Last words?
Last words. I think for me, it's just having shared KPIs. If your company, like in my case, everyone in the company's KPI is subscriber growth. We're at that stage where we need to grow really fast, and everybody has to pitch in. Now, whether you're working engineering, operations, people and culture, or marketing, everyone is looking at that North Star metric, and everyone understands what value each function has to play to deliver that metric. And therefore, there's no need to do sell-ins, to do buy-ins. Like, everybody just understands that, I can make the best product in the world, but then if people don't know about it, then nothing happens.
Okay, I think that's it for this session. I think one last parting word from me would be, if anyone asks what the value of a story is, I'm not particularly religious. Think back. Religions have been telling the best stories for a good part of 2,000 years. The brand promises are there, but the variations are all growing and spinning off into sequels, and they allow for collaboration and co-creation. People are still co-creating. And they all started off from a limited budget with no computer internet to pass it on, but it was still viral.
And a clear insight.
And a clear insight. So just think about how religions have been functioning for the past 2,000, 3,000 years, and how they've expanded, and how they're still making money off it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Calvin.